Welcome to CBS 42's presentation of Alabama's Hidden History, honoring Black history across the state. I'm Sherry Jackson.
And I'm Jack Royer, and we begin at historic Moton Field in Tuskegee, where the mission of the Tuskegee Airmen to get Black pilots into the air is remembered with exhibits and stories. And a few hundred feet away, that mission is being carried on.
Divine purpose. It was all meant to be. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, I didn't know when or where, but I always knew in my mind that it would happen.
Early in his life, Rodney McKnight had an interest in flight. Hours on simulators with his half-brother kept him interested. But one moment.
And it wasn't actually until I was 14 years old when his dad took me up flying. He let me sit in the co-pilot seat. And that's when something in my brain clicked. And I said, okay, I'm going to be a pilot. Now it's just a matter of doing what it takes and figuring it out.
Straight out of high school, the Marines gave him the start he needed. But finding out about the Red Tail Scholarship Program was the icing on the cake.
So when I got on the scholarship and I started flying, it took me a while to figure out, okay, you mean to tell me that all I have to do is show up to the airport, and once I show up to the airport, all I have to do is perform, learn how to fly, and do my best, and read books and learn. I don't have to pay for the fuel. I don't have to pay to rent the airplane. I don't have to pay for the instructor.
The program is working to carry on the legacy of the Tuskegee Airmen by introducing young Black men and women to aviation just a few hundred yards away from the hangars that the airmen themselves used when training nearly 80 years ago.
This is holy ground to me. You know, these are holy grounds, and it's almost as if this was scripted, and I'm just honored to be able to be here and to walk behind the steps of the Tuskegee Airmen, behind the path that they so graciously paved for us.
Flight training and career training are only one part of the scholarship program's mission. The other is communication with a community vastly underrepresented across the board in the aviation industry. Only 2% of pilots in America, both military and civilian, are African American. People
just don't know. For example, ignorance. People don't know that there's an airport here, that we're on these grounds that are, from my perspective, they're holy grounds. There's people who live in Tuskegee that don't know that this airport is here. The group participates in outreach activities and is active on social media, but they hope to grow the program beyond Moton Field. Outside of this airport, the way this program grows is by way of sharing that mindset, that mentality, and that drive with others, and then hopefully they will be inspired to do the same. So now when other people see what it is that we're doing, they too will figure out a way to get involved. They too will figure out a way to accomplish their dreams and goals of being a mechanic, an aircraft mechanic or a pilot or air traffic controller, aviation manager. I mean, they're aircraft manager. The field of aviation is what people would call it a small community, but the possibilities and opportunities are endless.
If you'd like to help the Red Tail Scholarship Program or learn more about them, visit redtailscholarshipfoundation.org.
Coming up, we share the story of the man who led the fight for people like Rodney McKnight. See Alfred Chief Anderson. Stay with us.
Welcome back. The fight for civil rights and equality was fought on many fronts by both groups and individuals.
And starting in the 1920s, one man took his fight quite literally to the air.
But he figured the only way that he was going to be able to get his pilot's license would be if he saved enough money and bought his own plane.
In the late 1920s, it was unheard of for a Black man to fly a plane.
Chief Anderson is considered the father of Black aviation.
Born less than 4 years after the Wright brothers made their historic flight at Kitty Hawk, C. Alfred Chief Anderson was fascinated by flight. The only problem, beyond ground school, no one would teach him.
So he borrowed money from friends, he borrowed money from family, he borrowed money from the person that his father worked for.
When he had enough money, he bought a plane.
Not being able to find anyone to teach him how to fly it, he would taxi down the runway and then gun the engine until he left the ground a little bit, then would land back down. Sooner or later, he decided, I can take off and land, I can fly.
Anderson continued to grow his skills, picking up tips and tricks everywhere he could. In 1929, he earned his pilot's license. He partnered with Dr. Alfred Forsyth to be the first African Americans to fly across the country, and later earned fame for flying from the U.S. to the Caribbean. Wanting to become a commercial pilot, but still facing the obstacle of racism, Chief found an ally, German World War I pilot Ernst Buell, the Flying Dutchman.
And he agreed to help refine Chief Anderson's technique and help him to pass his commercial and get his commercial pilot's license.
He became the first black man to receive an air transport pilot's license. In 1940, Tuskegee Institute recruited Anderson to serve as the chief civilian flight instructor for a new program to train black pilots. In 1941, he took Eleanor Roosevelt on a 40-minute flight in a Piper Cub, dispelling the myth that, as she put it, colored people couldn't fly. He then became the ground commander and the chief instructor for the 99th Pursuit Squadron, which along with 3 other squadrons would be called the Tuskegee Airmen.
When he came here to Tuskegee, the local people were not happy about the Tuskegee Airmen being here in Tuskegee, the local white people. Chief Anderson was arrested by the local police and delivered to the Ku Klux Klan in hopes that the Klan would beat him up and try to discourage him from doing what he was doing. It turns out that the Grand Dragon of the Klan wanted to learn how to be a pilot himself. So when he learned that Chief Anderson had been arrested, he intervened and had Chief Anderson released from his fellow Klan members because he wanted to learn how to be a pilot himself.
And throughout his life, Anderson never took no for an answer and became a legend in aviation, not only for his triumph over racism, but for his skill in the cockpit. Chuck Yeager even referred to him as a damn good pilot.
And he's still inspiring pilots today, black and white, because of his excellence and also because of him not being willing to quit. It's a lot of hard work to be a pilot. You have to have a certain stubbornness, and he definitely had that.
When we come back, the fight for equality goes from high in the sky to deep underground.
The role Birmingham's underground played in bringing blacks and whites together in the workplace. That is after the break.
Welcome back to Alabama's Hidden History, honoring black history. Birmingham's mining history is well documented. It's a major part of what made it the Magic City, and remnants can be found throughout the area.
But what happened in the coal mines of the late 19th and early 20th centuries helped set in motion what was to come later.
The late 1800s. The South was in the process of rebuilding, blacks and whites far from being seen as equals. But one component of what made Birmingham the Magic City was an exception to the rule: coal mining.
It was a little bit more egalitarian than other industries. Segregation was not an issue because once you got underground, for one of the common sayings was that everybody was black down there once they got covered with coal dust.
Everyone in the mines faced the same dangers, took the same risks, and did the same work, so they were paid equally. Later, however, things began to change.
After the Supreme Court's decision with Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896, then that made segregation legal, and every Deep South state rewrote its state constitution from 1896 to 1905, which then legally established segregation, or what we call Jim Crow.
Communities above ground became segregated. States instituted convict labor, Alabama beginning the practice in 1872, forcing many into the mines to pay debts of citations and court fees. And well into the 20th century, mine owners used race to separate the free miners and prevent efforts by the United Mine Workers to unionize in Alabama.
They had a biracial union effort there, and all this was stymied in Alabama in various ways until you got federal legislation as part of the New Deal in response to the Great Depression. And so you finally got collective bargaining and recognition of the unions in 1933.
The unionization effort brought about safety changes and better representation for all workers in the fight for better conditions on the job. The men in the mines may not have known it, but they were part of the movement for equality above ground too.
I don't know that that would be a conscious thought on their part, but I think again it's that idea of having regular work, of having a good paycheck, frankly being able to provide for their families.
In the 1960s, the fight was above ground on the streets of Birmingham, but it began nearly a century before, far under the streets where, as they said, everyone was black.
But I think there is an innate sense that, hey, I'm doing the same work, I'm breathing the same air, I bleed the same color as you do. I think that there's a sense there, regardless of the color of your skin, as to saying, hey, we're all human beings.
The steel industry, coal, limestone, and iron ore made Birmingham into a hub of industry in the South. The miners made progress in being seen as equals underground.
But above ground, the fight was just getting started, and a small neighborhood church just north of downtown would have a major impact when we come back. Welcome back. Throughout the program, we've shared stories of people doing what is necessary to change what was wrong. And in Birmingham in the mid-1950s, one man pastoring a small church decided to nonviolently lead the charge here in Birmingham.
Because of what Reverend Shuttlesworth was doing during that time, and because it's been bombed 3 times and is still standing, I think that's also one of the things that's made this place very, very special.
The Bethel Baptist Historical Landmark is a small church building on a street corner in the Collegeville neighborhood, but its contribution to the civil rights movement in Birmingham is immeasurable.
The church was founded in 1904, and this building was built in 1926. And the church has always been a vital part of the community. I mean, it always has been. A lot of what happened here, people were the first to do. We were the first to have a separate educational wing. We were one of the first, if not the first, to have an indoor baptismal pool. There were teachers here. There was a general who came out of here. There were politicians here. When Reverend Shuttlesworth came, he started getting involved in breaking down the segregation walls.
Known for his courage, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth challenged segregation everywhere it existed, not just as a civil right, but as a human right. The organization he founded, the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights, was headquartered here at Bethel Baptist. They organized the 1961 Freedom Rides to end segregation in public transportation. In fact, after Freedom Riders were brutally attacked on May 14th that same year in Anniston, Alabama, Reverend Shuttlesworth sheltered them at the Bethel Parsonage.
But black people could come together in church and they could do a lot. Most of it because of their faith in God. They really had that faith, and Reverend Shuttlesworth was one of those. He told me personally that he really believed that this was God's will for his life.
Amazingly, Shuttlesworth survived a bombing at the Bethel Parsonage on Christmas Day in 1956. 16 sticks of dynamite destroyed the building, but Reverend Shuttlesworth and his family walked away unharmed. The incident made him even more determined to confront segregation. After the bombing, he said God saved him, and to this day, Shuttlesworth is famously quoted as saying, "I wasn't saved to run." Now, as part of the Civil Rights National Monument, the church building stands as a testament to all they did and a monument to their enduring faith.
I would like to see this church lead the effort in restoring this community, for one. I really would like for this church to be involved in trying to help the education, in trying to help people get out of poverty. Because one of the things we've seen from being in the area is that poverty brings on just a lot of issues that you may not understand if you've not been exposed to it. There's a mentality that poverty brings. There's a short-sightedness that poverty brings. There's a desperation that poverty brings. And so I would like for the church not only to create a physical environment, I would like for the church to be able to create a culture that changes what the young people out here go through.
The movement led by Reverend Shuttlesworth led to an end of segregation in all respects of life, including education.
When we come back, we'll share how a college experience of integration led to a career of change and understanding. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Throughout the move towards integration, many pioneers emerged.
What one of those pioneers learned during his time at the University of Montevallo served him throughout his life.
Many firsts come with pain and problems. When Lonnie Edwards was recruited by Alabama College to be one of the first black athletes, the stories of other integrators in the South sparked his mother's fears.
But the history of transition and interracial relations had not been that favorable in her lifetime. And on the heels of what had transpired with the immaterial issue there in Mississippi, and she had 9 boys, and so I was the first boy. So she was very reserved about what would happen to me.
His aunt and grandmother also feared what would happen, urging him not to go, fearing the worst.
So I said, can I just have any input in this? You know, that was after I had met Coach Jones, after I had met Dr. Davis, and I says, they are good human beings. I say, and I hope I can learn that it's beyond race. It comes to human relations, and my relationship with them was at a human level. I really appreciated them. And I don't know what will happen. I said, but if you allow me to, let me sidetrack my comfort zone.
Edwards was the last scholarship given by Alabama College, as it became the University of Montevallo when he started in 1969. 2 years before, the school had admitted 3 black women as students. But Edwards' appearance on campus as an athlete gained more publicity, bringing visibility to the subject of integration. It wasn't without small problems, but Edwards and his fellow basketball player Hansel Gunn learned from those who went before them at other institutions across the South.
We was conscious of all of what had happened before us. We was conscious of the students that had tried to enter Alabama, and we made it different here with President, when we got here, President Johnson was just a class gentleman, and very mature in terms of the readiness for, integration.
In his first year, the Montevallo basketball team had their best season to date. Edwards went on to be a class favorite and return after graduation to earn a master's degree. He and Gunn both were inducted into the Hall of Fame. The lessons he learned at Montevallo carried on into his career as an educator in Georgia, where he helped integrate the DeKalb County schools. Later, he became an administrator, then a consultant, helping break down barriers across the country and some foreign countries.
But the fact is that Montevallo helped me in many cases overcome those perceptual barriers when I was working in predominantly white environment.
Barriers broken down because of the way Edwards looks at his experiences and his relationships throughout his life.
I wanted to really find out, did it really matter when it got down to the basic things? And I realized that we all needed food, we all needed sleep, we all needed work, we all needed family, we all needed friends. And then the challenge was, can we be friends? Can we really be friends?
We thank you for joining us and sharing in just a small portion of Alabama's hidden history.
For more stories, information, and hidden history from across the country, visit our website, cbs42.com. Thank you and good night.